So at the start of this year, 2021, if you're watching in the future, I decided to write a book. And 75 days and 165,496 words later, I was done. Holy shit. Hey guys, Sebastian here from Sebastian's Cauldron. Of course, I've mentioned before on this channel that I enjoy writing, and I've made passing comments about the fact that I have been working on a book, I think maybe in a video in one of my Firearms and Fantasy series, or perhaps in a comment response somewhere, but I've never actually sat down and really talked to you guys about the book in question. So that is this video today. We're not even fucking around or anything. This is probably the shortest intro I've ever done. We're getting straight into things. So the title of the book is The Separatist Revolt. It's kind of hard to nail down a specific subgenre just because fantasy subgenres are getting very, very niche these days, and what I've written is equally niche. I'd call it first and foremost a gunpowder fantasy. This probably isn't a surprise to people that have watched my Firearms and Fantasy series. You can check that out up there because I love including gunpowder and black powder based weapons into fantasy stuff, whether it's in my D&D games or in my own personal writing. The more common term for that is flintlock fantasy, but that sort of implies a level of technology around, you know, flintlock rifles. Think French Revolution, American Revolution, Hamilton, all that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, the flintlock fantasy term isn't quite accurate for my piece because what I've written is sort of at a Wild West level of technology. Think revolvers, double-barreled shotguns, lever-action rifles, that sort of thing. That being said, I understand that flintlock fantasy is a lot more recognizable to a lot of people thanks to books such as the Powder Mage trilogies and everything, so yeah. Another term that I've used is fantasy western, which is pretty close. This is a story about gunslingers, about deranged religious fanatics. There's a hell of a lot of action. Now, I don't want to give too many details away in terms of what is going on in the plot, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you my drafted blurb that I have. The leader, the recruit, the investigator, the vengeful. A botched operation by the Separatists to steal secrets from the internal consortium sets off a chain reaction of events that will change the pews forever. Scrambling to survive, the Separatists' awoken leader, Audra, finds herself mentoring Caleb, a new recruit who has just become awoken. As they rush to escape, their trail is picked up by Niobe, a god-touch of the consortium, who begins to uncover a web of secrets and lies that threatens the foundation of the consortium's rule, and delves into the affairs of Locke, a former god-touch who has returned to the pews to enact his awoken vengeance upon those who wronged him. The lives of awoken and god-touched alike become intertwined as the Separatists make a desperate attempt to topple the internal consortium. But will their efforts be enough? A hidden enemy lurks in the shadows, one that threatens to destroy Separatists and consorts alike. So that's what it's about. I reckon it sounds pretty cool. I mean, you'd hope so, considering I spent so much time writing and working on it. It's like a mashup of 1984 meets The Magnificent Seven with some notes from Stephen King's The Gunslinger, the Dark Tower series, which I've got a full dedicated shelf sort of just behind me here, as well as, you know, drawing on things like Tarantino's Django Unchained and just the entire Doom video game franchise. So how did this start? Well, if you've watched my campaign diaries, which you can check out up there, you would know that all of my D&D campaigns have been set in this one sort of singular world, which doesn't have a name yet. I've been trying to work on that. My last campaign, The Ascension of Ajax, had its own dedicated wiki. I'll put a link down in the doobly-doo down there. You can check it out. Just note it hasn't been updated since like March 2020 because we haven't really played since then. But that had a lot of world building involved, and I found that a lot of the world building aspects of being a DM, sort of creating and building up the world and the setting that the players get to explore, was probably one of my favorite parts of DMing. Doing things like including cheeky little references to, you know, other player characters or to other NPCs from past campaigns and everything, I found were some really effective tools at doing some quick and dirty world building. And after a few years of DMing, of writing, of sort of building homebrew adventures and homebrew settings, I realized that I actually possessed a lot of the skills necessary to, you know, try and write something for once. I've always been a bit of a writer. I've loved writing little scenes and snippets from the BBEG's perspective, some of them a little more serious than others, but I had ended up writing a few sort of scenes based on a character who would eventually become one of the main characters in the Separatist Revolt. I had just used the world building and the setting that I'd created for Ascension of Ajax in writing all of this stuff. So on the 8th of August 2020, I sat down in my OneNote, which is my note-taking app of choice, and I actually started writing some notes. I might even put a screenshot up somewhere. My initial planning, my initial thoughts were quite scattered, to say the least. I'd come up with quite a few things that ended up staying constant. I knew how many point of view characters I wanted. I came up with quite a few names for different things. I came up with the 3 different magic users, the Awoken, the God-Touched, and the Blackcoats. But the actual idea of sitting down and writing a fully fledged book seemed quite scary, and I just enjoyed doing this world building for a single night, and then I left these ideas and I put them away and I didn't touch them again. And then January happened. I sort of had a renaissance of reading fantasy, and I sort of thought, well, shit, I should actually give this a go. A friend of mine recommended to watch Brandon Sanderson's lectures, which he's put, all on YouTube, which is fantastic. And that sort of revived the spark of creativity that I had on that first night of world building. After I binged the first few lectures, the ideas very quickly rushed back to me, and I thought, okay, I need to do this. I started collecting some more ideas, coming up with names and things, little plot ideas that I wanted to have happen, and on the 14th of January, I started to write. So the first thing I did was I took Brando Sando's outline for Skyward, and I deleted everything, and I used that to create my own personal outline template, which I'll also put down in the description below if you want to use that, if you want to check it out. I used this to start fleshing out and making sure that my ideas were in a cohesive, singular place. I found, similar to D&D, that my ideas would snowball. One idea would beget another, you get the idea. The most important part for me was the plot heading. I wrote a note to myself, which was very ambitious at the time. You're gunning for around 150,000 words. That's a lot. 125,000 would also be great. 40 chapters or so, which you can split into 4 parts. 10 chapters apart means on average your chapters will be 3,125 words each. That's including the multiple viewpoints and the epigraphs. I started writing introductory chapters for the 3 point of view characters, but from there I very quickly came across a problem that I have had in the past. I didn't know where to go from there. Like I said, I've always been a bit of a writer, and I've attempted to write books previously, but I often found that I didn't know where to take things, and I often sort of stopped before I could really pick up any steam. The Separatist Revolt is actually a spiritual successor, I would say, to something that I wrote in 2014, 2015, which was called The Desert. It was some pretty blatant fan fiction of Stephen King's The Gunslinger. However, there were quite a few elements which I ended up repurposing and including in the book. The problem with that was that I didn't have any idea of where I wanted it to go, and I was sort of just writing on a whim. For this book, I did something that I'd never done before. I actually sat down with an outline and started writing out the story that I wanted to tell. It wasn't even the full thing. It was just thinking ahead for the next few chapters and thinking, what would be really cool to have happen? How do I want this sort of plot to develop? Now, I found that this was absolutely essential for my writing process. I already had a pretty decent idea of the story I wanted to tell. It's a story about a rebel group trying to topple an oppressive sort of system, and I knew that I had some plot-specific beats that I wanted to hit, but other than that, I wasn't too sure about how I wanted things to go and where things would end up going. In my planning, I very quickly came across an idea for the ending, which stayed pretty constant, and that was really helpful as well in knowing that I was going to start in one spot and I knew where I was going to end. The act of outlining was really helpful for me just in setting my intentions, knowing exactly what I wanted to do in each chapter so that I wouldn't try and jump ahead. There was no hesitancy or no worries about, oh no, I don't know what happens next, because I knew exactly what was going to come in the next few chapters. I'd always been quite fast at typing and by extension at writing, and I found that setting myself a daily goal was a really essential tool for me as well. Taking a page out of Brando Sando and Stephen King's books, Stephen King's like a self-published author, he hasn't really written that many things. I decided that writing 2,000 words a day would be a suitable goal for me. If I'm being perfectly honest, I didn't think I would last. I figured I would get to like 10,000 words as I had before, and then I would stop. So after 9 chapters and 29,000 words, I finished the first part, the first quarter of the book, and I came across the first sort of major hurdle, which was how the fuck am I going to continue this? So at this stage, the outlining that I had was just for part 1, just for those first 9 chapters, and the sudden thought of having to do an extra 30-something chapters was extremely daunting to me. My days were spent writing and were spent outlining. I was often doing both at the same time. I often found myself outlining and then writing and then outlining more and then writing. I've been doing a lot of world building, coming up with more characters, more, ideas for the magic systems, different ideas for plot beats and everything that I wanted, but I wasn't sure on how to actually structure them in a sort of narrative framework. I found that often taking a day or 2 off from the daily act of writing and instead using that time to just specifically outline and world build were really important for me. Furthermore, outlining at different levels I think was really important. Not only was I looking at chapter by chapter, but then I was looking at the overall parts. I already knew that I was splitting it into 4 parts, so outlining what I wanted to have happen in that specific part was really handy. Furthermore, outlining specifically with just the characters and their development was really handy, and then I would worry about, where I would place them in the chapters and everything after the fact. Like I said, I already had a vague idea of how I wanted the story to end, and as I got closer to the ending, I found that idea stayed pretty constant, and this allowed me to both work forwards and backwards. I knew where I wanted the characters to end up, and so I could sort of logically move back from there, but then I was also moving them forward so they would eventually meet up in the middle. Doing research into story structure was also really handy. I discovered the 4-act story structure, which is basically the 3-act story structure, but the middle act is chopped in half and sort of increased a little bit, and that was really helpful just in sort of understanding narrative frameworks, the beats and everything. I had already decided that the book was going to be split into 4 parts, so it was really convenient to, just map it to the 4-act story structure, especially when I looked at the first act and I realized that it was pretty bang on with some of the beats that I wanted to hit. I found that much like my DMing style, having an outline or an idea of what I wanted to do didn't squash my creativity at all. In fact, it helped to facilitate it. Sometimes I think in trying to be creative, you need to give yourself boundaries and limitations in order to let ideas properly bloom. Trying to create something from absolutely nothing, from a complete vacuum, can be quite difficult, I've found. My chapter outlines would sometimes be incredibly detailed because I had a very specific idea of what I wanted to do, and other times it was only a few sentences and it would be something as simple as Niobe goes to George's house and makes a house call. This process led me to do some really interesting things, including realizing partway through part 2A that I actually needed to add a 4th viewpoint character. And so I went back and I added her. And then as I wrote the ideas for how I wanted to end and where I wanted the character arcs to go became clearer. And so that made it even easier to work, as I said, forwards and backwards. This process wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. It wasn't all just, writing and being happy with it. There were days where I was having a bad fucking time. My friends can attest to my obsessive nature, and there were days where I was in a very bad slump because I was just so worried, not having any ideas and not knowing how to progress the narrative. I found that having friends or dedicated people that you can talk to about a creative project to help bounce ideas off of was so incredibly useful. Sometimes you don't need someone to offer advice or to offer ideas or anything. You just need someone to sit and listen. I found that talking often helps you to make connections that your thinking brain wouldn't necessarily make. Just the idea of getting it out and trying to articulate it helps you understand it better. I also found that having a whiteboard next to my bed was really handy because if I woke up and I had an incredible idea, I could just sort of, reach over and scrawl a little note on the whiteboard and leave it like that. I didn't have to get my phone or anything. Being consistent with my writing was both a challenge and also a curse. I did my 2,000 words a day no matter what, except for days where I was specifically outlining. And also except for days when I was hungover or sick. You can't produce any good work during those days. The book took priority over most things in my life, including work, including uni. Even at work, I would be not really thinking of, doing orders and everything. I was just focused on, what am I gonna have happen next? An example of this, one time a longtime friend of mine who's also a player in all of my D&D games was meant to be coming over because we were going to go out for drinks or something. I realized I hadn't done my 2,000 words yet, so I told him to sit on my bed and wait for 30 minutes because I had to smash my words out. I did, and then we left I was very driven just by, okay, I've got to get this done and then we'll go. Realizing that what I had to write wasn't going to be perfect was another major hurdle to overcome. Just the pure notion of knowing that this is probably going to be a hot fucking mess, but that's fine because I'm going to edit it later and it's going to be really good. And that really helps to just push through and make sure to get the words out. So this process continued, writing, outlining, writing. My 2,000 words a day would sometimes stretch to 3, 4, or even 5, depending on, just how into the writing I was getting. Once I got to the last quarter of the book, part 3, I found that I was consistently writing 5,000 words a day, even doing 8,000 words at one point. And that helped me to finish the book much faster than I probably would have done otherwise. On the 30th of March 2021, at around 8 o'clock, 8:30, I'm pretty sure I wrote those beautiful last 2 words, the end. And after 75 days and 165,496 words, I had a completed first draft in my hands. Holy shit. I cracked a drink, I put the entire thing into a single Word document and watched as my computer struggled to load this 600 odd page Word document. Word doesn't handle big documents like that, I found. So that was a few months ago, obviously 30th of March. At that point, I took some time off of the book. I actually started planning and then writing another book, a pirate sort of thing. I got 20,000 words into that until I realized that the story wasn't going to sustain itself, so I scrapped all of that, came up with something new using a lot of the same world building, and then did another 30,000 words before I sort of stopped and thought, okay, hold on, I'm a little burnt out, I need to take some time off. After trying that, I decided just to go back and edit it. I had a couple of months away from it, which helped me look at it a little more objectively, remove a lot of the emotion from it, and I started doing the painstaking process of trying to edit this bloody thing. I'm aware that this video is probably going a little long. The script for it is about 13 pages, which is a bit long, so I'll probably talk about the specific editing in another video. But the current state of the book is I have nearly finished part 2B's developmental edits. That's fixing up character consistencies, inconsistencies with the plot, and making sure that everything is relevant and important and there's no, fluff that I can remove. I've been working with a lovely friend of mine who's been doing an incredible job of going chapter by chapter and giving extremely detailed feedback. So if they're watching this because they want to remain anonymous, thank you so much. You know how grateful I am. And holy shit, thank you. I'm hoping that I can have the main edits for this done sometime before November, because I am planning on doing NaNoWriMo. That's another video that we'll talk about as well. And from there, I can start sending it off to people and hopefully have a vaguely polished draft before January so that I can have this thing finished in about a year's time. The Separatist Revolt is meant to be the first book in a planned trilogy. I've got a shit ton of ideas for books 2 and 3, and I'm really looking forward to working on those and everything. I'm gonna try and get this thing published because, well, yeah, I think that would be really cool. So hopefully this is something that you guys can, end up reading and sharing and whatnot and enjoying, and I certainly hope that you do because I've, poured my heart and soul into this thing. So yeah, that's the book, that's it. If it sounds cool, if you like the sound of it, leave a comment below, give the video a thumbs up, all of that stuff. Let me know if you like this sort of content, if you want more of it on the channel. I am gonna be talking about some D&D things later on, don't you worry, but it's all broadly fantasy, so it's fine. That's me, that's the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you guys some other time.